Welcome to this tutorial on BagaPie's parametric tools. We will cover the essentials of the pie menu and see how the modifiers work. The idea is for you to start using it even if we can't cover all the details. First, we have the Snap Asset tool, which enables precise placement of assets on a surface. To demonstrate this, I will need some assets, so I will add a few primitive shapes. Here we are. I am selecting these objects that I wish to position on my surface. Finally, I will select the object that will receive the modifier, which is my surface. I press the J button. Now Snap Asset. I press Escape to stop the addition. Now I position my objects. If I don't hit Escape, it keeps adding objects. Escape. Here, as with all modifiers, I have the main parameters. At any time, we can resume adding instances by clicking on Add Instance. If you enter Edit mode, you can see that each asset is actually a vertex. This means I can move it. If we check the Item tab, we can see that Bevel Weight and Vertex Crease manage the object's rotation and scale. Finally, as with other modifiers, we can tweak visibility in the viewport and rendering, like in the outliner, or choose to remove it. Next, we have one of the most popular tools. This is Ivy. You simply need to select the target, which is the target of this ivy. J, ivy. We see that it adds an empty. This empty is the ivy's source. If I add more objects, such as a cube, to include it as a target for this ivy, I select the cube, then the ivy, and choose Add Target. We can observe that my ivy will snap to the nearest one. You can add additional sources to this ivy by placing the cursor in Shift right-click mode. Make sure to select the ivy and then click Add Ivy to 3D Cursor. Now we end up with multiple ivies. We can remove the part we added, but not the original part. To understand how Ivy works, we have a view guide here. It displays the primitive shape generated by Ivy and helps to understand how it projects more easily. If I turn on Grid Project, we switch the generation system, resulting in a projected grid. To remove the ivy, I select the ivy and remove it. Then we have the section for architecture. Depending on the tools, some will need a selection, while others won't. For example, in the tools that don't need a selection, there are columns, tiles, beams, stairs, and floors. To place a beam elsewhere, I just click here. No selection required. Like always, I have all the necessary settings on the side. As with all items in BagaPie, they are completely parametric. There is the material here. Keep in mind that handrail and fence show up, although they should require an object. This happens because if nothing is selected and I select a tool like fence and start to draw, it creates a curve and goes into draw mode automatically. When I add a curve and then select handrail, for instance, it detects the curve and adds the modifier. Fence and handrail have an important settings. They have two modes. A curve mode that will follow the original curve and a poly mode where they will only rely on the vertices. It doesn't matter what the curve looks like. Finally, there is tools such as wall, pipes, cable, siding, paving grid and plank. That needs selection. For example, adding pipes switches to draw mode, requiring me to specify the target object. A specific feature of pipes is that it rounds the positions of our objects to create geometric pattern. There is a precision parameter that, when increased, allows for a better fit of the curve. Among the recent tools, there are these last four: Paving Grid, Plank, and Perforated Grid. They all operate on the same concept. For example, if I add plank, it transforms every faces into planks. You will notice that the Windows tool displays a warning. This is normal. This is because the tool that existed in previous versions of BagaPie has been replaced by a new, much more useful Windows system. The wall modifier changes edges into walls. If applied to a cube, it won't interpret correctly and will yield this result. Let's check out the tools for arrays. For example, I will add a monkey and put a line array on it. There's only one object to select. These parameters are quite similar to the array modifiers found in Blender, but this one has random options for rotation, scale and position. And one that Blender doesn't have by default is the circular array. If I raise the radius, you can see our array shape. This is normal, it's because of the circle's resolution. We just need to increase it to get a nice circle. We can base the repetition on the distance between instances or on a fixed count. I will switch back to distance. We can increase the number of circles and add an offset. Note that by playing with the parameters, we can create a lot of shapes. And like all the other modifiers, I can randomize both the rotation and position. Next is the curves modifiers. There are multiple types, we will see all. For the simple curve, I choose my object. I select curve J. Curve, as with the others, we can distribute them by distance or by count. And we have, like for the others, all the possible random parameters. Next, we have the curve deform, similar to that of Blender. It takes the Blender modifier. This will deform our objects based on the curve. There is no randomness for this one. Change the axis here. The default axis usually fits. Next is the draw modifier, where you can select one or more objects. They appear and draw. We switch to draw mode in a new curve and it distributes the objects. Note that if you have a surface or any object, when you use this array, the tool is set on surface mode, so it will snap your surface. And here we find the randoms for position, rotation and scale. You will notice a grayed out asset browser button next to several tools. It enables the use of the selection in the asset browser with the related tool, such as draw. So if I select these assets, always ensuring my selection is made in a library, not in the all library, I come here and use asset browser. It will import my assets and set up the draw tool. Finally, there is the array along shape tool. We select our objects. Lastly, we select a surface to target, which is the surface that will be followed, and array along shape. Keep in mind that this modifier has a bit of trouble with edges that are too sharp. This is why I will add a bevel modifier. I return here. I raise the number of segments and it will automatically follow the surface. The precision parameter simply allows for a more accurate definition of the distance between assets. By default, the array is locked to one axis. However, we can free it here and have a much more unpredictable array. The array is managed by proximity to the surface. Let's take a look to the Manage section. There is two default buttons, Create Group and Proxy. For groups, I invite you to check the dedicated tutorial. For proxies, it's quite simple. This allows you to replace an object by its convex hull. There aren't really any properties for this modifier. It is automatically disabled during rendering. This helps optimize the scene. You can select multiple objects at once to apply a proxy. When you select proxy, it will ask to remove the proxies. In a scene, you can select everything, including proxies, and remove all proxies in one go. Or conversely, put everything under proxy. Next comes the Boolean part. Simply select a mesh. You can do union or difference. In our case, we will do difference. Switch to Add Cube mode. This enables you to add volumes and you can create as many as necessary. Now go to the BagaPie panel in the Boolean settings. What can be interesting is that you have certain settings, like a bevel. Add bevel to the object itself. Add a solidify. And add symmetry. This can be very useful for certain sci-fi elements. Finally, two small tools that might be useful. Here we have the Displace tool, which lets you set up a displacement easily. Next is the Instance Displace, which generates a displace effect, but only on instances. For example, if I scatter an object and modify the displace instance, I can generate this kind of pattern. Thanks for your time. If you have a few minutes, check out our other add-ons and assets. I hope BagaPie helps you. Thanks.